Okay, here we are again. You guys can't see it, but I've done this about 5 times already, if not that, if not more. I got smart and I started just doing little pieces at a time to see what would happen. But here we go, chapter one. I'm finally getting there. Okay, in chapter one, we are talking about communication and why we study it. And quite frankly, it is the guide to everything that we do in life. If you don't know how to communicate, then you cannot successfully interact with others. And I know you're saying, hey, I've been doing this since I was a kid. I know how to communicate. I have no problem with it. Well, but the fact is, you might, and you just don't know it. Have you ever had a miscommunication with someone? Have you ever had a problem getting an idea across or understanding what someone else says? Well, there you go. That's communication. And in the textbook, even on page 3, says that 1/5 of students cannot successfully commit with elementary level communication tasks. And it also says 60% cannot give clear directions. They're not talking about 1/5 of elementary school students. They're talking about a 1/5 of students. That means you guys. So we have to work on communications. It's just part of how we go through life. Now, you're going to notice on these slides that there's going to be some changed text. And what I'm talking about is the purple, bold, and underlined. What this means is that that item will most definitely end up on a test. Okay. Uh, Everything else is, but those items are definitely on the test because I believe in what's called backward design. That means that I've already made your tests before I even started putting together what we're going to talk about here. Okay. All right. So communication. How do we communicate? Why do we study it? One, to improve your employability. Employers were interviewed, and of all of the employers interviewed, most of them said that 80% of what they want to see is good listening. Listening skills, just basically someone listening and understanding what they had to tell them. 78% said that interpersonal communication skills are so vital. And yet, what are they actually seeing in the workplace? 28% have good listening. That's way off the 80% mark. And 27% have good interpersonal skills. Again, way off the mark. So we have to remember communication matters. And even Warren Buffett, if you don't remember who he is, he's the very, very super rich guy, and he has made it in business and he knows how to make money. And he even said in an interview, if you improve your communication skills, I guarantee that you will earn 50% more money over your lifetime. I'd say that's a good reason to study. We also know that it helps to improve our relationships. You know, when we are born and when as we grow up, we learn how to have a relationship with others based on our first initial relationships. And so communication with our families shapes how we are going to interact with others. And we learn our language skills, not the language itself, but the skill, the ability to form letters, the ability to form sounds by the age of 3 is vital. And in your book, Virginia, I think it's Satir, said that the largest single factor determining the kinds of relationships we make with others is communications. Okay. We are who we are taught to be to a certain degree. And we start learning at birth. We know that it helps with health. We need intimacy. And I'm not talking about romantic intimacy. I'm talking about those 3 in the morning phone calls with your best buddy. We're talking about sitting over coffee and just talking for hours. We're talking about sitting on opposite ends of the couch and watching TV together, but being comfortable enough together that it feels like an intimate experience. We need those opportunities just to be healthy. And they've all already, I mean, you've probably heard of married couples, one would pass away and it's very sad. And the second, it doesn't take much longer. Their health starts to decline. Same thing happens with divorces. Health can take a hit after a divorce. And it's because we go through that grief process, and the grief influences our health overall. How do we define communication? Well, their definition is very basic, very simple: the process of acting on information. Okay, human communication means that we are taking information from others and we're acting on it, sure, but it's not just verbal communication. It's everything that they send us. It's all the messages that we see and we hear, and the symbolism and everything else. It's the process of making the sense out of the world, at least our own version of sense, and then sharing it with others. We have to create meaning through messages. Now, let's talk about making sense. We might look at the same event and see two totally different things. That has a lot to do with our own personal sense of history, our filters, if you will, the experiences that we've had in our past, which are going to influence how we see events in the future. So when we make sense of something, we might be making a different form of sense than somebody else. And so we share our sense with other people. And by sharing, we can hopefully learn how they saw it and how they experienced the same event or image or whatever it may be. But we also share it through not just through words and language, but through music. We all have different styles of music that we prefer. People get very surprised when I don't listen to country. Sorry, it's just not my choice, but that's okay. We share through art. We have different styles of art that we prefer. We share through movement and how we move, how we express ourselves. I'm a hand talker, and I know this is silly. The other hand is down here holding the microphone because this computer stinks. But at least this is the only way to you, and I hope it works. If it doesn't, I'm going to give up. We also share who we are and how we experience the world through our clothing, color choices. We all share information, our vehicle choices, and so we're sharing our sense of experience of the experience of life. We create meaning through the combination of all of these items. And of course, then we share through messages. And when we share a message, you have to remember that words are symbols. Our prefrontal lobe here takes the symbol in, it cognitively figures out the meaning, and it sends it to the rest of the brain. All right. So we know that certain words have meaning, but we do also know that words can change over time. Sounds have meaning. If my barks, it depends on where she is. If she's at the back door, then she's wanting to go out. If she's just laying there barking at the nearest doorknob, that's probably because she's 17 and getting a little senile. We we share visual images that represent thoughts, concepts, experiences, objects, and these are all symbols that we have to interpret based on our own experiences, based on our own filters. Here's one. I love this. It's got that little, all the little symbols in the circle. And usually we see those symbols nowadays. That means somebody's cussing. Okay. But that has to do, again, with filters. That only came about in the last 15, 20 years. 15, 20 years ago, if I saw a sign like that with all those little symbols, I might not have known what it meant. And so we have to recognize that people around us don't always have the same filters. They don't always have the same experiences. They don't have the same background. And so, and it can be influenced by culture as well. So we need to learn how to be other oriented when we are communicating with others. And we need to make sure that we are communicating in a way that they can comprehend us. All right. So we have to encode our messages a little bit differently, and we're going to get to that one. Now, some more things to remember about communication. One, it's inescapable. It's going to happen. I don't care how much you choose not to communicate, you're communicating. If you're giving the silent treatment, that's communication. If you're refusing to speak, that's communication. If you just sit there with an odd look on your face, that's communication. It is inescapable. You cannot not communicate. It just can't happen. Communication is also irreversible. I love the little bird here. I can never run through this because it's so true. Have you ever wanted to scrub your eyeballs? Well, it's the same thing with words. Once the words are out in the world, okay, you cannot put them back in your mouth. They have erupted into the universe, and that's where they are. And so once it's said, they're always present. Now, communication is also complicated. If you look at this helical model of communication, down here are the words maybe you did not choose to say or something you blurted without thinking and you hurt somebody's feelings. Well, you can try to make it better. You can try to make it ease the pain of it a little bit, but it doesn't matter. It all had to start somewhere and it's still present. I don't care what you do to solve the problem, that communication misstep is still present and it will never go away. Some of the more characteristics of communications, it's the difference between content dimension and relationship dimension. The content is what is said, the specific words. I used to tell my daughters when they were young, I love you dearly. You're getting on my nerves. I don't like you right now. Go to your room. They knew what that meant. What I said was, I love you dearly. But how I said it was, it's over and you need to walk away now. But then other times I would say, I love you dearly. And it would be truly very loving. I love you dearly. You're my favorite. Okay, I never picked favorites, but you know what I'm saying. So the content dimension is what is said. Relationship dimension is how something is said. If someone asks you to go to the movie and you say, oh, yeah, I just love to go, that gives a definite impression of what you're truly meaning. So where is the meaning in there? Is it in the words or is it in how it was said? Kind of a combination of the two. We also know that communication is governed by rules, and these rules are not always explicit. Now, there are certain rules that are explicit when we are taught as children how to behave, and we might be told, don't put your elbows on the table. That's an explicit rule. We were told that. Implicit means it's something that we all kind of know, but we never actually discuss. And an example of an implicit rule here, waiting in a medical waiting room. You notice how they're sitting apart from each other? They have the spaces between seats because you never, ever, ever sit right next to somebody in a waiting room unless that waiting room is jam packed full, right? Otherwise, that would just be creepy. We give everyone their space. We have our bubble and we expect others to respect our bubble too. We're going to talk about some models of communication and how we go through the communication process itself. In order to do that, I need to make sure we all have the same terminology that we're working on. Now, you're going to hear me say sender, and whenever I say sender, I'm actually talking about in this text the source. He uses a different term and it confuses me, and I'm just letting you know now that I will get those two mixed up. So if I say sender, I mean source. I'm going to try to remember that myself, however. The source is the person who created the message, okay? Encoding means putting it into the symbols. Taking the idea that I want to express, figuring out a way to say it, encoding it into language, and then I send it out to the receiver. You right now are the receiver, okay? And you are decoding what I'm saying, and hopefully I'm being successful in encoding my message so that you have no problem figuring out what I'm trying to say and decoding it. Now, the message can be different according to the day. If you go order a sweet tea at Sonic, that's a very short message. But if you decide to go and order number one and then make all these changes to it, that's a different message, right? So there can be issues in the encoding and decoding. The channel is how the message is passed. We were just talking about Sonic, and I hate those little Sonic speakers. You can't always guarantee that they're going to work. Now, they've updated a whole bunch of systems here in town, yay, but I still always manage to find the one that does not work, and I have to scream into that microphone, and then I can barely understand what they have to say. That's one kind of channel. Telephone would be a channel. talking on the telephone, or chatting via text, or talking via email. All of these things are channels. Television, of course, is a channel. That's a mass media channel. And we can't really respond to it. I mean, we can scream at the TV all we want, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to hear us. Okay. And then we have noise. Noise in this text, I don't like the word noise. I prefer the word interference, because noise and interference, they interfere with the communication event. And external noise, that's the only one to me that's actual noise, and I could, read on a decibel scale. External noise would be lawnmower going off in the next room, somebody ringing the doorbell repeatedly, your telephone ringing or your alarm going off, loud music in the next room, whatever it may be externally that keeps you from taking in and decoding the message. Physiological noise would be like if you're sick, you have a cold. I'm sorry if I'm sneezing my brains out, I'm not really listening to what you have to say. I should be, but I'm not. Psychological noise is that's when you're sad, when you're depressed, when you are otherwise occupied, or maybe you're elated and you can't keep focusing on this because you have something wonderful happening later. That would be psychological noise. Okay, so now we've looked at most of the terms in the various models that we're going to look at, and let's take a look at those models. And the first one is a model as action. Okay, I've always called this the linear model of communication. It's almost like I'm committing communication on you. It makes no sense because it gives the receiver no opportunity to respond. But we see the source encoding the message, hopefully no noise, and the message being sent via a channel. Hopefully there's no noise in that channel, which can happen, especially if you have breakup on signal. And then the message reaching the receiver, who then decodes, and hopefully there's no noise inhibiting the decoding of the message. But we all know that communication is more intense than that. This is more like somebody watching TV. Okay, you're over here watching TV and they're sending it out. Now, here's the thing though, the important part of communication is the feedback we get back. And right there is very important feedback. As I'm talking to this computer, I don't get feedback. And it feels a little awkward because I have no idea how you are taking in this information I'm sending you. But I can draw on previous history with this same type of material, and that's where context would be. And so I can kind of hopefully figure how you may be responding. So that's context, but I still don't have outright feedback, do I? Now, in a conversation with another person, you're going to have facial expression, you're going to have tone, you're going to have laughter, you're going to have nodding, you're going to have anger, you're going to have a frown, whatever it may be, but you're getting feedback. And those are all messages that are being sent back to you in response to your message that you've sent them. So, depending on context, of course, which can, by the way, be, and I just explained the historical context, physical context, you and your partner in communication may be in different physical environments. You may be sitting at home on your couch watching TV, and the other person may be actively working, and that's going to affect their interpretation of your messages. And then we have the psychological environment. Have you ever been so super happy you wanted to share news and you call the one person who was just dealing with some bad news? Totally different psychological environments. And you can't understand why they're not excited for you, except you can because maybe they just had bad news. So that's just the message exchange format. But I prefer the transactional model. Communication is transaction. There is simultaneous interaction. You get feedback and message all going at the same time. The meaning is co-created. Have you ever had those situations where something is just hilarious at that moment? You try to explain it later and you cannot. That's because y'all created your meaning right then, right there on the spot. And it doesn't always repeat, it's irrepeatable. So here's the model as interaction. Here's the, source creating the message through the channel. The receiver takes the information and sends feedback. This is more like, I'd say, a classroom. But I prefer the transactional model. The source is also the receiver, and the receiver is also the source, going back and forth. You're transacting throughout the entire course of the communication event. And you are all based on context, and hopefully, you might have two separate contexts going on, or you might have the same context. It just depends on your situation. Okay, to be an effective communicator means that what you say needs to be understood, needs to be clear, it needs to be effective, and it needs to be appropriate. Okay, understood, I've always said that: clear, effective, and appropriate. Understood means to be clear. Your message went through appropriately and clearly. Your effect, did you achieve your intended effect? Was it effective? And is it appropriate? Is it ethical? Is it what needs to happen? Okay. Now, I'm not going to read through these with you. However, if you want to look at ethics and the different religions and belief systems around the world and how they believe, I think that would be a valuable thing to do. You can look at it on your own. Oh, I need to get through my notes faster, don't I? I'm about 3 or 4 pages off. Okay, let's take a look at the nature of communication now. We have different types of communication going on. We are now in the world of mediated communication. Before, mediated meant TV. It meant telephone, maybe, because you can't get the facial expression on telephone, radio. But now we have cell phones, we have texting, we have emails, IM, Snapchat, Insta, FB, Parlay, all kinds of different programs. And depending on the nature of the communication, it can be mediated or it can be mass. Television is still mass media. Advertising is considered mass media. Radio is considered mass media. Okay, so there's a difference between mediated and mass. Just because someone is an influencer on Snapchat does not mean mass media. It's still mediated communication. And let's look at the difference between synchronous versus asynchronous communication. Synchronous means you're getting your feedback right then. It's like ping pong, right then. You say what you have to say. They give you feedback. They say, and it goes back and forth. Asynchronous means that it takes a while to get the message through. It can take anywhere from a minute to days to hours, whatever it may be. It used to be we had to send messages by snail mail. And I remember sending letters to my grandparents and getting letters back and getting excited because I got mail. And we don't get excited about mail unless it's around birthday, Christmas. We don't get excited about bills, that's for sure. So those are asynchronous. Synchronous means instantaneous. It's happening right now. And frequently, communication nowadays, people try to multitask. My phone's been going off like crazy this whole time, but I'm not getting a phone because I know that I have limited capability to multitask. Only 5% of the population is truly able to multitask and do multiple things with technology at one time and put 100% of their effort into every single one. And I know that most of you right now are thinking, I'm one of them. And I can guarantee you, no. Maybe individuals in this course, possibly, but it's a lot rarer than you think it is. And they've done studies on this in China and Japan. Oh, technology capital of the world, Japan, right? and all of these people so technologically advanced, and they did the studies and they discovered only about 5% of that advanced technology world was capable of giving 100% to everything. So please don't rely on multitasking to try to get all your work done. Focus on one thing at a time. But we do rely on mediated communication quite often. I prefer to text. I am not a phone talker. I've never enjoyed it. It's never been fun for me. I was not your average teenager back when we had telephones that got plugged into the wall. I didn't want one of my own. I didn't care. I just didn't talk on the phone much. Now I'm a texting fool. People call and I stare at it a second thinking, do I want to answer this? But think about how we communicate on social media. Okay, this says Facebook, but how many of you have Insta, Snapchat, Twitter? Uh, oh gosh, there are Tumblr, Parlay. Oh gosh, there are a few more out there. I'm not going to throw in things like Tinder and POF and, of course, silver singles. You know, the fact is, we use social media for so much. If you look at my phone right here, I have all of these apps all over. And this is just one page of my phone. And I have 3 pages. Yes, you probably saw Pokemon on there. I do play Pokemon Go. It's great when you're walking. Walking is boring, but I need the exercise. So, how often do you use your social media throughout the day? Do you have a lot of friends? Great. Are they really friends or are they acquaintances? We're going to talk about that more later. Are you an active communicator? Do you respond to other people? Do you not respond sometimes? What kind? Does it depend? If you share a lot of pictures, how do you what kind of pictures do you share? My niece is the meme queen. I swear, that's all she does. She shares memes all day long. I can tell when she's on break at work. And we've also noticed that men and women use Facebook differently. Somewhat Instagram, somewhat Snapchat, but when it comes to places like Facebook, Tumblr, Parlay, people use these apps differently. Women are more apt to discuss emotional days and things that are going on in their world. Men are more likely to share weird information, interesting tidbits, and true sarcasm. They love sarcasm. Not saying I don't. I do appreciate a good sarcastic meme every now and then. So when we look at the online communications, we have to remember, what are our needs? What are your needs? Online, sure, you're getting communication. You're getting justification for your beliefs, maybe. You're getting to see some different viewpoints other than your own, possibly. What are you getting that meets your needs? But face to face is where you're going to get the intimacy because you're not going to get that online. And I know people say, but wait a minute, I've been in intense relationships online. You hear that a lot. And some people, it actually works. I mean, my brother was on a dating service and online dating service, and he met who is now his wife, and they just celebrated 5 or 6 years. Congratulations to them. It can happen, but you also have to be aware that not everybody is who they say they are because anonymity allows deceit. Remember, anonymity means I can put my name as Tanya Frolic on Facebook, but how do you know that's really me? I've been fighting because there's this other Tanya Frolic on there, and I don't know who she is, and it kind of weirds me out. Now, there's also another one, but she and I are actually friends now, and we chat every now and then. But, you know, I get these friend requests, etc., from people that claim to be my friends. No, it's a cloned account. It's someone totally different, and so they're anonymous. I have no idea who they are. That allows for deceit. Plus, we also know that you get behind your phone, you're sitting in your room. Yeah, it may have your name on it. and everybody may know who you are, but you get behind your phone, you on your keyboard, you get keyboard courage. We call that cyber courage. Okay, you will say things that you normally would not say face to face. And if you would say it face to face, should you? All right. So, what's the difference between interpersonal communication versus impersonal? I think you've probably got that answer by now, right? Interpersonal means you're going to have some level of information, intimacy, shared experiences, self disclosure. You're going to have an interest. Impersonal is very basic. Impersonal, not personal. I'm going to go in and I'm going to buy a soda at the counter. I'm not going to have a long, in depth conversation with the person behind the counter. That is an impersonal communication event, and it does not need or require any extra communication. And yet, we know people that will because they don't understand that that's not necessary, nor is it wanted. We also know that group communication, small group communications, brings out more of who we are personality wise. If you're sitting with your friends and you're in a small group, if you happen to be the introverted type, you might be kind of sitting back, watching, waiting to see what happens. If you're more of the extroverted type, then you're going to be one of those that's right in there with the communications and you're going to be making plans and things to do. We're also going to be learning more about rhetoric and communication throughout the semester. And rhetoric is how you put together language because think about it, we do have access to such beautiful language and we can put it together in such a way that it moves people. We've looked at some speeches in the past that have moved people to tears, moved people to action, moved people to a new behavior. That is the act of rhetoric in presentational communication. We also know that we must apply communication in organizational context as well as health context. Organizational context means, okay, I am not going to talk to my ultimate superior up here the same way I would talk to maybe my peers, my colleagues, or even the people who work underneath me. I might have a different level of language involved, possibly. I don't know. I tend to speak the same way to everyone, but I'm one of those people. I always try to stay appropriate. Who knows? Health communication is key. 60%, according to studies, and I'll try to find those studies if you want to see them. 60% of all medical malpractice incidents take place due to inappropriate or inaccurate communication, either between the doctor and the patient, between the doctor and the nurse, or between the nurse and the patient. But somewhere in there, some miscommunications are going on. So we need to learn about health communications as well. Now I'm going to, each one of these, this is just a visual graphic, but we're going to go through each one of these in just a moment. Is the 5 communication principles that you need to take with you now and forevermore. Okay, ever. 1, be aware of your communication with yourself and others. Are you lying to yourself? Or are you telling yourself the truth? Sometimes we lie to ourselves, don't we? And it's hard to accept that we're not always who we claim to be. Or you need to be aware of when you're talking to others. Remember that they have a different perspective. They have a different set of filters. They have different history and background, and maybe a different viewpoint. And so that's where you have to be aware of your communication. And intrapersonal communication, by the way, is when you're sitting there talking to yourself. Okay, let me just see who that was real fast. Okay, it had to do with the UPS shipment. 2, effectively use and interpret verbal messages. This means work on making sure that you speak clearly and that you understand what other people say. If you do not understand what they say, it's perfectly acceptable to ask for clarification. Here's a hint though, if someone asks you for clarification, don't repeat what you just said using the same words, because their decoding process may have had something to do with the language choices you made. Okay, so rephrase it, figure out another way to put it, and then send it out again. 3, nonverbal. Effectively use it and interpret it. We have to understand what other people's gestures, facial expressions, and other nonverbal cues represent. If I'm sitting here talking to someone, got their arms crossed, one foot is tapping, the other foot is aiming towards the door, that tells me they've already got one foot out the door on this conversation. I have learned to interpret those nonverbal cues, and you can too. 4, listen and respond thoughtfully to others. Remember, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, okay? We need to be other oriented, focused on the needs and concerns of others while maintaining your own personal integrity. I'm not saying give up parts of yourself. I'm just saying acknowledge that other people are going to have a different viewpoint and it's not always going to be the same as yours, and that's okay. So you need to learn to listen. Sometimes we have to learn to listen and walk away, but you need to learn to listen. And 5, appropriately adapt messages to others. Now, this does not mean adapting in such a way that you're giving in. Okay, you're not giving in. What you're doing is you're adapting to their feedback. And at one point, your adaptation may be okay, I cannot agree with what you're doing, but I can respect your choice to do it and walk away. Okay, that is chapter 1. Hopefully, it went through this time. And I will work on getting chapter 11 to you in just a few moments. Y'all have a great evening, morning, day, whatever you're choosing to do right now.